Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And welcome to everyone who is in the space with me today. I'd first like to ask you a question so I can get a sense of who's in here with us. If you don't mind, if you could pop in the chat where you're watching from. So what country, what city are you watching from? And if you can also pop in there, are you a leader? Are you a leader? If you're a leader, type in the letter L. If you consider yourself a member of a team member, type in the letter T. So I'm just going to wait and see where we are. And I can tell you a little bit about myself in the meanwhile while we're waiting to see some things come into the chat. So I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and then I spent, 15 years living in Atlanta, Georgia. And now I am in sunny Florida, where it is always beautiful, beautiful weather. Okay, I see. I'm going to be, you probably have a hard time with my middle name. I'm going to have a hard time with your name. Katerina is in Berlin. Anybody else want to drop in their city? And she is a team member. Good. So the program, when I get into it, is going to be helpful for you, whether you're a team member or whether you are a leader of a team. Any other cities? Any other cities or countries that you want to drop in? All right, well, so I will go ahead. Okay, I see Dawid is in Malaga and he's a team member. I see Cologne, we've got a team member. This is exciting. First off, congratulations for showing up in this space. This is a wonderful space. I see we have somebody here from Spain. And when we get into topics that involve diversity and compassion, sometimes they can be a little difficult. So I want you to kind of pat yourself on the back for being here and for taking those first steps. I want to start our talk first by taking a few breaths together, and then I'm going to share my screen and we're going to delve into the topic. So first, if you're someplace where you were seated and you can do this and not be too weird, if you could rub your palms together, get a little energy, and then go ahead and take your right hand to your heart. Take your left hand to your belly. And I just want you to see if you can notice your heartbeat. Usually our heart is beating all the time and we're not paying attention. And see if you can notice the rise and fall of your belly. Many times we kind of start holding our breath when we're stressed out or we breathe through our chest. So see if you can relax and breathe into your belly. And let's just take 3 breaths together. So go ahead and inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. And if you're not in a really weird space and if you're not driving, we'll do 2 more. Inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. And the last one, inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. All right, did I miss anyone? We have Murcia, Spain. I'm probably doing a terrible pronunciation here, and also a team member. So thank you. Thank you to everyone who included something in the chat to give me a little sense of where you are. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So our topic today is why diversity matters, how compassionate team building improves your bottom line. And you notice when you see next to my name that I have an MBA, but I'm also a certified life coach. And I'm also, that little RYT is a registered yoga teacher and also a meditation instructor. So if you're wondering, well, why is she starting off with the breathing? It's part of what I do. And it's also a good way for us to get settled in when we're looking at a topic that maybe we don't look at all the time. I included my pronouns there, she, her. And I know when I first started seeing pronouns, I would say, why are people, I don't get it. The reason that we use pronouns, for me as a cisgender woman, as a straight cisgender woman, I have a certain privilege because that is considered the majority. When I use my pronouns, it allows me to kind of create space for other people who don't identify the same way that I do. So let's get started. I always like to know what's going to happen before it starts happening. So here's the agenda for today. I'm going to talk about myself just a little bit to let you know who I am. We're going to get into what is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and why do we care? I'll talk to you a little bit about oppression and compassion. Sometimes we throw words around, and it's really helpful to understand what they really mean. And then empathy boosts creativity, which I think is very interesting. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to talk about the demographics in the US and how those are changing. I'm sure that there are similar patterns taking place in other parts of the world. And then we're going to get into the 7 elements of high-performing teams. And we'll talk about how you can build your team, because that's what we're here for. Of course, I want to have a brief comment on compassion fatigue, what that is. If you've heard of that before, we'll go into that. And then finally, I've got a book raffle for you, and we're going to do some Q&A if we have time for that, and if you guys have questions. So for me, I'm the founder of a company called Mind Blowing Happiness. It's a coaching business. We started in 2019, and the past few years, so since then, I've written 3 books. I've helped thousands of people really achieve the lives that they want from the perspective of showing up authentically, finding their purpose, and walking in fulfilling lives. My newest book is coming out in the spring, and I'll be able to tell you a little bit about that shortly. But the work that I've done so far it's just gotten some really amazing endorsements. So Jack Canfield, you may know him as the creator of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Marcy Shimoff, who is the narrator of one of my favorite documentary films called Happy. And she was also one of the featured teachers on the film The Secret, if you've seen that film. And Iyanla Vanzant also endorsed my work. She used to be on the Oprah Winfrey Show for many years, and then she had her own show, Iyanla Fix My Life. So she is an iconic spiritual coach. I also serve as consulting editor of African American Issues for Natural Awakenings magazine here in Atlanta, and I'm on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for the Junior League of Atlanta. And this is a very interesting side note and part of how I got into doing this work. I spent 12 years working as a financial advisor in Atlanta, and during that time, I was a party in 3 class action lawsuits at 2 major financial services firms, totaling $184 million, which is a lot of money based on not just race, but also gender. So it was kind of, what we call School of Hard Knocks introduction into diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. All right, so I used this term a few times. Let's get into kind of what this means. So what is diversity? Sometimes, at least here in the US, I know people will hear that word and they think it means something about being Black or white. It's really just about variety. So it can show up in that way, but it can show up in other ways. And I'll get into that with you shortly. But think of diversity as just what it is. It's not a secret code word. It's just about having variety. Now, equity, sometimes people confuse equity with equality. You can think of equity as justice. And an example that I like to use is, say you have a couple, a man and a woman, they're having a baby. The prenatal vitamin is going to go to the woman. It's not going to go to the man. So equality would mean that they both get the prenatal vitamin, but they don't both need the prenatal vitamin. So the equity is the justice. It's the person getting what they need in a fair and just way. And then inclusion. So inclusion is really just talking about feeling like you have a place, right? Feeling that you're belonging. When you walk into this space, there's 44 of us in this space together. Hopefully you have a sense that you belong here, that you feel comfortable in this space. Before we go on, I want us to take 30 seconds, and I want you to think about a time when you didn't feel included. So it could have been maybe sometime in school, maybe middle school, or maybe high school, or maybe starting a new job, or traveling solo for the first time, going to a theater by yourself. It could be anything. But I want you to just take a moment here and remember a time when you did not feel like you belonged or you didn't feel included. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. I'll let you know when I'm halfway through. You got 10 seconds left. So that was 30 seconds. Feel free to share in the chat. I will check the chat from time to time. I know for me, there have been a lot of times that I felt like I was not included. The first thing that popped into my head was when I was a new student at my high school. The high school that I went to in New York had a population that was about 3% Black. And I grew up in Brooklyn in a predominantly Black environment. So it felt very uncomfortable for me. So I kind of remember those days. But if anything else pops up for you, feel free to share with us and we'll keep going. Okay, so what creates diversity? Again, you know, I'm a woman, I'm a Black woman. Those are the first things that I thought about, that I think about. And then when I started working in this field, I started realizing all the privilege I have and all the things that I don't think about. So are you able-bodied? You know, ability, different types of abilities create diversity. What about age? Are you over 50? Are you under 50? You know, do you have a range of ages in your organizations? And then body type, body size, could be culture and ethnicity. And so culture and ethnicity can be quite different. I am a Black American, so I would identify with Black American culture. But from an ethnicity standpoint, my parents are from the Caribbean, or we would say we're from the African diaspora. So that could be different for ethnicity. So just to point out that culture and ethnicity can be quite different. Gender identity, we spoke about a little in the beginning. But of course, there's a lot of conversation about gender fluidity and more than just male and female. But how do you identify as gender? Are you in an organization where all of the leadership is male? You know, are there ways that we can have diversity? Your language of your mother or of your hometown, home language. What's your immigration status? And then, of course, there's race, but there's also color. There's shades where there can be diversity in there. Religion, sexual orientation, and then there's classism, right? I'm actually getting geared up to write a piece on using credit scores when we hire people. Is that classism? What are we trying to figure out? And then, of course, veteran status. And this is not an exhaustive list. There are all kinds of ways that we can create diversity, but these are some of the first ones that come to mind. All right, and then you're probably over there, maybe, maybe not, and you're like, Trish, but why do I care? I'm thinking that you care because you're here, but why should you care? Like, what is the reason? Who cares, right? We've all got our own problems. So first off, I love starting with that breath. Because sometimes, you know, the 3 breaths that we took together, because sometimes when we're out here in the world and we're working and we're doing all the things, we forget that we're people. You know, we want to have businesses and make money and do amazing things, but we're also people. So if you remember, you know, in the States, we have kindergarten, but primary school, preschool, in your family, most of us have learned some variation of the golden rule, which means that we treat others the way that we would like to be treated. Now, if we really did that in this world, we wouldn't have all the problems that we have, but it is still something that we can aspire to treat people the way that we would like to be treated. So that's the first reason that you should care about diversity, equity, and inclusion, is because you want to treat people the way you'd like to be treated yourself. The second is that there are business benefits associated with it. So when you have diversity of ideas and experience and knowledge and backgrounds, frame of reference, you just get more information, more creativity, more possibility for innovation. And finally, depending on where you are, most places have some government laws that don't allow you to discriminate based on certain categories, whether it's race or religion or whatever applies where you are. And who wants lawsuits? That's no fun. It wasn't fun for me, and I was a recipient of it, but it wasn't fun, the environment that I had to work in that created those lawsuits. Okay. And then again, why should you care? So I talked a little bit about innovation. There's a study from Forbes that talks about the actual profit from that. So it shows a 33% increase in profits, which is really significant. I'd like a 33% increase in profits. All right, so I think that this is so important to talk about. I know most people don't understand this, so I wanted to make sure to talk about this idea of the 4 levels of oppression. So whether you look at any of the groups that we looked at before, if it's based on gender or race or color, these can show up for these groups no matter which ones you choose, even if it's just based on sex, male, female. So the first level of oppression is ideological. So it's what people are thinking, the core belief that one group is better than another. So maybe that men are better than women, maybe that straights people are better than people who are not straight. However you look at that, but this core belief is where it starts, this idea that one group's better than another. And then the second way that oppression gets embedded is into the institutions, so that, businesses or government or policies, schools, education systems, media, politics, all of the institutions that we deal with repeat the same core belief that this one group is better than another group. And then because it becomes so, like what I like to call baked in the cake, then it impacts interpersonal relationships. So it allows members of the dominant group to, disrespect or make fun of, people in whatever the oppressed group is. Could be through jokes, harassments, through stereotypes, could be violence, could be threats. We see what's going on globally, and I'm sure all of these things are familiar to you, but I think it's very interesting to see kind of the layers from idea to institution to kind of this interpersonal empowerment. And the most interesting part to me many times is the internalized oppression. So because the ideas are embedded in every aspect of a society, that it can become feelings of superiority in the members of the oppressed group, and then it can become these feelings of superiority in the members of the dominant group. So it's got a lot of legs and threads to it. All right, well, so can we change though? Can we grow our compassion? Is that a thing? Of course it is. Part of the human experience is that we can change the things that we're doing, which is why you're here, because we're all here to learn. So I want to talk to you about sympathy, empathy, and compassion, because they're all different. So sympathy is typically a feeling of some sort of sorrow about someone else's situation, but it's generally not something that resonates very deeply with you. So it could be, maybe somebody starving in another country far away that doesn't look like anybody in your family. So you may have a sense of kind of pity or sympathy, but it's not that deep. The second level is empathy. So empathy is when it's someone you identify with. So maybe you see someone suffering, but it's someone who's like in your neighborhood. Like maybe someone in your neighborhood had a house fire and you think, oh, wow, I can really identify with that. I'm in the house across the street. Or it could even be someone in your country who maybe you don't know them personally, but they look like you and they look like they come from a similar family as yours. So you feel more of resonance with what they're experiencing. Now, the next level is compassion. So compassion is really an action word. So you have the empathy, you identify deeply with what somebody's experiencing, but then you also have the desire to do something about it. Okay. So I want us to just let's take about a minute here. I'd like you to think of a few groups from the list that we looked at before that you don't belong to. And we're just going to take a minute for a visualization. So get comfortable. See if you can kind of gather those three groups. If you're male, I would try maybe female. If you're a woman, you might want to do a male, or you might want to do someone with a different sexual orientation or gender identity as you. So, try someone with a different appearance, maybe a different race, and maybe someone from a different country. So find at least one, but ideally if you can do three, that would be great. And hold that in your mind. Okay. So close your eyes and imagine being this person. So you're still yourself. You have your personality, but you're in a different situation. You have different characteristics than what you're accustomed to. And I want you to just imagine having those characteristics and how you feel. Do you feel different? Do you feel scared or worried or confused? And then I want you to imagine being this person that you've created in your mind, the different characteristics. And imagine that you're sitting in a park bench in your neighborhood as this new kind of appearance of yourself. And so you're sitting in a park bench in your neighborhood, maybe someplace that you go to frequently. And then how do you feel in this environment? Do you feel welcomed? Do you feel uncomfortable? How do you feel? Are you scared? Are you worried? And then imagine a few people just walking up to you or passing by you. How do they look at you? Are they kind? Are they welcoming? And then just sit with that for a few more seconds here. All right, we're going to keep going. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of an experience of what it might feel like to be in someone else's shoes. Now, part of the thing is that in order to have that sense of empathy, you have to tap into your creativity. And for many of us, at least in the United States, I know for me, growing up, they would tell you, stop daydreaming, or you need to focus on your schoolwork. So it wasn't necessarily supported, these kind of creative daydreaming type ideas. But it's very helpful when you are trying to generate empathy and compassion for others. Okay. So I'm going to give you another minute just to give this a try. And if you have paper, you can write down. If you are using an electronic device, you can take notes into your phone. So have you ever heard the word compassion growing up? Was that a word that was used in your family? And I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to think about that. How did your family or community show empathy to people who were different from them? You have about 20 more seconds. And then what steps are you willing to take to lead a more compassionate life. So one of them was showing up for this training today. Are there any other steps that pop into your mind based on anything that I've spoken about that you might be willing to take to lead a more compassionate life? Okay, take a few more seconds there. And that's my book, 12 Steps to Mind-Blowing Happiness. I will be raffling off some digital copies at the end, and it's a great place to work on compassion, but also work on having more fun in your life and growing as a person. All right, so let's look at some demographics, right? So we know that the world is changing. This is US data, but I'm sure a lot of this is true for around the world, that we are looking at an aging population. People are living longer. So there are more instances where you have older team members and younger team members working together. And then in the US, we are also seeing changing demographics around race, where the number here is showing that by 2045, at least in the US, that non-Hispanic whites will be less than half of all Americans for the first time. But generally speaking, no matter where you are going to see more, hopefully you'll be seeing more diversity. And I don't know if you remember these US brands, but don't get left behind. These are some old brands that we just don't see much of anymore. So what does this mean for your business? This could mean that you're going to have different kinds of clients to work with, different staff members, different vendors, and maybe working with different communities. There's the potential, again, for liability, which we would want to avoid, but the profitability is really in your ability to serve your customers. And, you know, my business is called Mind-Blowing Happiness for a reason. So I'm always looking for opportunities for learning and for fun and for growth. So as we go through some of the team building steps, I'm going to ask you, how can we make it fun? Can we make it fun? So these characteristics of high-performing teams came from a 2012 study based out of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And these are what people look for in teams. First is trust, open communication, and understanding of what the vision is for your organization and why they should be on board for the vision. They're also looking for diversity. They want the opportunity for continuous learning. Today's a great example of that. And then also you have to be able to measure objectives. You can't set goals and then not have any way to measure it. You know, people also, when they are appraised, they want to know what they're being appraised on. They want to know that we're all working with the same objectives and they're measurable. And of course, who doesn't like a gold star? People like recognition. All right, so first, I would like, as we go through this, we're going to do at least one action step for each characteristic of high-performing teams. And again, we're going to see if we can make it fun. All right, so the first one, building team trust. These are a few ways that you can approach this. One is to craft a mission statement that's really open and honest, that shows some humanity, some compassion, and that recognizes diversity. Create an employee manual so it's clear what the rules are and what people should abide by. And then be transparent. I think this is a big one. Let people know a salary range or how people are being hired, the grounds for appraisals, grounds for termination. And then you can also build team trust by giving people the opportunity to get to know each other through team building events and activities, and of course, ask for diverse input. So when I first moved to Atlanta, I started working for a major financial services firm. You know, I had come from the northern US to the South, And they had a team building event that was skeet shooting. I don't know if you guys know what skeet shooting is, but I'm a Black woman. And this was an organization that was, everybody else was white, and they wanted to go to the woods and shoot things. So I was not interested in going to that. So I just said, when you put together, and for them, they thought it was great. But when you put together team building events, ask people what they want to do and get diverse input. So I'm going to give you, let me see, I'm checking the time here. Let's just take around 30 seconds with each of these. Is there an action that you can take back with you today from this list? And is there a way for you to make it fun? And so we'll just have 30 seconds here, and I'm happy to share my slides with you when we're finished. So that's about halfway through. Okay, and that was just about 30 seconds. So building that trust in your team. And then the next team building characteristic we want to talk about is building communication. We've all sat in those meetings where you have two people who talk a lot, and then you have two people who are very quiet. So how do we get everyone's voices to be heard? The first, I would say, embrace diversity in communication. So when you have communications throughout your organization, let people know that this is something that you want to include, that you want different types of voices to be heard. And when you have meetings, encourage everyone to speak. So even the people who don't like to speak, encourage them to speak. You might even literally pass a baton. Sometimes the quiet ones have the best ideas. And then allowing anonymous feedback is another great way to get people's voices. There are a lot of, techniques you can use for that. And then if it's possible and appropriate, see if you can create a method for skip level communication so that employees or team members are not always communicating to the person who's right above them, that they have the opportunity to also communicate past that individual. All right, so we're going to take 30 seconds, and I want you to just see if there's one action from here that you can take away with you, and can you make it fun? So this is where we have to use our creativity. Is there a way to make it so that it's actually fun? I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Got about 10 seconds left. Okay, let's go. Now, how do you build a vision? A vision is the thing that people will really get excited about. So for me, my mission is to teach my 12 steps to mind-blowing happiness that you've seen on my book to 12 million people. So that's my mission. We've seen other great iconic companies that have like these incredible visions that people really want to attach themselves to. So what is your vision? So when you have that mission statement or that vision statement that is including, diversity, you also want to make sure that it's accessible, that people can see it. So maybe it's on the website, maybe it's in a manual, maybe it's something that you chant or that you say, maybe it's a tagline at the bottom of your emails, something to help the team remember that we're all going towards this one vision. So you want to repeat it often, let it be said in meetings, remind your team members why we're showing up to do this work. And then get employee feedback. It doesn't have to be a static vision. It will adjust as your organization adjusts, but get feedback. Is it a vision that makes your people feel good? Because if they don't feel good, they're not going to be on board with it. And then let's just take 30 seconds here. So which of these actions can you take? And can you make it fun? You got 30 seconds. Okay, you're halfway through. All righty. And then how do we create diversity in our team? So again, diversity covers all these different areas, and we're looking for a mix of experiences, which sometimes shows up as age. It can show up as background. It can show up as frame of reference, like culture. So we want to look for these different experiences so that we get the strengths and the viewpoints that we need to have different bases covered. And this can appear in the recruiting process, excuse me, in the hiring process. It can appear in promotions. Who are we promoting? Sometimes we'll see firms where the entry level is very diverse. You've got, women, you've got men, you've got all different shades and cultures. But as you go up the hierarchy, you see fewer and fewer and fewer. So is the diversity showing up in promotions and the opportunity to move forward in a firm? And then also in vendors. Vendors is many times an easy way to make a few changes. And of course, we need metrics so that we are tracking changes as they take place. Because otherwise, if you don't use metrics, I know I'm talking to the tech community. So you guys like metrics, because if you don't use metrics, you don't know what happened. And then finally, get some help. If you need help, there are DEI consultants and organizations that specialize in specific groups of people, or some specialize in overall. Okay, so what action can you take, and can you make it fun? What from this list can you do to help build diversity on your team? And we're going to just do about 30 seconds. About halfway through. Okay. And let's keep going. So learning is very important for groups. I think for humans, we want to learn new things. Certainly for employees, in order to stay interested and engaged, they want to learn new things. So how can we do that? So first off, investing in regular training. And the important part here, training and development on topics that your team members want. So there are times when you may want to teach them what you want them to know, but you need to also think about what they actually want. And then, of course, invest in diversity training. For most of us, we've grown up in environments where people kind of look like us, and we have a global economy, we have a global world, and training is just required to understand other people. So that is very important. And again, creating opportunities for people to move up in an organization. So here we go. What action can you take? What action can you take? We'll take 30 seconds here. And that's halfway. So that was 30 seconds. All right, so we're getting into how do we measure things? How do we measure? So you've probably seen this before where we say to set SMART goals or SMART objectives. The SMART simply stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So you want to make sure you're not just setting goals that are so, we just want to have more women, or we just want to have more people of color, or we want to be more open to people with disabilities, right? So when you say that, how do you track it? At some point, you have to get into the numbers so that you can see, okay, our team only had 1% women last year. We want to get to 10%, let's say. Whatever those numbers look like, hopefully they look better than my 1% and 10%. They should be 20% to 40%. I don't know. It depends on your industry because it can make a big difference. However, set specific goals so that you know whether or not you achieve them. And when we say attainable, you don't want to say, well, we have 1% now, but next year we want to have 50%. You want it to be realistic and attainable. So those are SMART goals. Diversity should be a management objective, which means that when you are being appraised, that you are being appraised based on your ability to achieve some of these goals. Because, if it's not appraisable, then many times people will not really take it very seriously. You want to track and report your results. And how can we make it fun? We're going to think about it for 30 seconds. And I'll let you know when we're halfway. All right, you got about 10 more seconds. Okay. And then recognition, right? We all like those gold stars. We want people to say thank you. We want to get things that we like. So acknowledge productivity, acknowledge teamwork, give special recognition for meeting objectives, including diversity goals. And what employee doesn't love a recognition program with some rewards that they actually want? And want, again, is the important word here. So if you're giving them, cards to a restaurant, for example, to a steakhouse, and your employee is vegetarian, it's not what they want. So ask them what they want and give them choices where possible. And we're going to take another 30 seconds here. What action can you take? Can you make it fun? Use that imagination. Can you make things fun? Got about 10 seconds left. All right. So compassion fatigue can happen when you are dealing with this work, thinking about other people all the time. So what do we do about that? If we feel like we've just, oh my goodness, I'm thinking about everybody's problems. I need to think about me. Well, that's how you do it. You start by having compassion with yourself. So recognize that you are learning too. You're not expected to know all the answers, how to use the right pronouns, or how to recognize people's countries properly. I pronounced everybody's name wrong when I started. So recognize that you are learning too. Make time for your own self-care. These two books are two I love, I recommend, and I'm happy to share with you I'll share the slide in the chat. Don't beat yourself up for not understanding something. We're all learning. And then use diverse media, books, and podcasts to continue to learn after our conversation today. Continue to try visualization. Imagine if you were someone else. And use critical thinking to discern information. It's so important now because we are now in the information age, but we are also in the misinformation and disinformation age. So you have to get really good about checking your sources. So I know we're close to time, so I'm going to leave this for you to think about later. What actions can you take to make it fun? And here are some more ideas of books and media to kind of increase your personal bandwidth around the topic of diversity. This is where you can find my work. So you can find me pretty much anywhere. I would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Trish Igel Roberts. And the new book coming out is The Anger Myth. That's coming out in the spring. Understanding and overcoming the mental habits that steal your joy. I am excited about this conversation around anger, and I think that it is very much needed in conversations around diversity and in everything happening in the world globally. Here are a few resources that you'll have access to as well. If you're looking for someone to come in and do cultural competency training, or someone like myself who does more mindfulness, empathy, and awareness training, as well as diversity trainings. If you're looking to recruit people, where do you recruit people who don't necessarily look like you, who aren't in your circle? All right, so I know I'm over by 2 minutes, but I want to do my digital book raffle. And the way that I would like to do that is the first 3 people who can put in the chat one of those areas of diversity. So I gave you a whole list of different ways that we can be diverse. So if you can give me any one of those, I have a digital book for you. And then I will also need your email address. But just give me first. Let me see. There's some really easy ways we can be diverse. And then there's some that you maybe think a little bit less about. I find you guys are shy. What are some of the ways we can be diverse? Thank you. Ekaterina, language, age, gender. You're giving us all the answers in one, but that's fantastic. If you pop your email in the chat, or you can send it to me directly, I will get that book over to you. So we got Ekaterina. I almost named my daughter Katerina. She is she's a computer science major at the University of Georgia, but I ended up naming her Kayla. So we were close. Does anyone else remember? What are some of those areas? We talked about pronouns. Thanks, Catherine. Catherine.inspiration. Okay, perfect. Nobody else wants to be mind-blowingly happy? Come on, we all do. All right, well, I will see if anyone else jumps into the chat. We'll leave that open, but I know that there is a speaker coming on after me. If anyone has questions, I offer training, coaching, and books for organizations, and that is how you can reach me. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. There's references here, but I will pop my slides into the chat.